Could there be anything less than nothing? Deep into the maze of a city, nothing echoed the steps of a man walking. Cold air breezing against his exposed skin, he watched the feeling of raindrops sliding down his face as it arrived and disintegrated into nothingness. Such climate could cause plans to collapse, dates to be indeterminately postponed, the unfortunate to be frozen to death as the clothed walked right past. He kept to his way of walking, hands now trembling, and gazed towards the cloudscape taking over the sky with its darkly hued mass. A sense of melancholy building up inside of him, he returned his eyes to the empty sidewalk. He didn't venture out all that much. He didn't talk to anyone besides himself and his cat on a daily basis. He met people every now and then, but he did not really talk to anyone. Never had it entered his mind to question whether that was a bad thing. Really. The man frowned. Whoever told him that was such a bad thing anyway? Suddenly, it dawned to him that he was an explorer. As he kept taking his body forward, he took a big breath and delved into his senses. His whole world had been right there, waiting to be perceived, and suddenly he recognized the tremble of his hand. He sensed the cold and decided that his hand needed no longer to alert him. He had always been all alone, just watching. How come he had never thought to perceive? The clouds displayed their might to the whole city, and he embraced them into his world. Every story has the right to exist, and so he kept walking on. Finally, he made his way under the shelter of a bus stop and leaned his back at one of the metallic pillars. There would be some time before the bus arrived, the man knew, and so he took his chance at a glimpse of the world, to slowly and consciously pull out a pack of cigarettes, placing one on his lips. He glared at the fire wrapping itself around the end of the cigarette, the colors interacting with one another in a dance of subatomic attractions. Eyes closed and sight focused within, he rested his head back and sensed as smoke traveled out of his lungs and out into the moist air. Letting the light reach him again, he noticed the previously melancholous clouds escaping with its exhalation before letting himself smile at the absurdity. The bus had reached its first start, and Dean stepped to the man. The man went and sat alone by the window, looking outside as cars sped further away. A whole cluster of noise surrounded him, the bus's engine, people talking with one another. He sensed that his senses started to get numb. This was the point at which he should have taken another deep breath, but his world had already gotten him lost in itself once more, and perhaps that was where he belonged. The bus made a sudden stop as its door slid open, allowing for a woman to make her way inside. She walked right past the man, her aroma flowing through the whole bus and blinding the sense that there was ever any rain outside to begin with. Soft dark hair reaching just below her shoulders in wavy patterns. She too took a seat next to one of the windows, holding coffee in one hand, nails all symmetrical and unpainted, and her phone in the other. She seemed to be enjoying whatever musical piece was being played through her wrapped perfectly around her head like flames headphones. Inhabiting her own little world, she paid no attention to the distractions around, and simply took a small notepad out her pocket before resting her head at the window. Having attended that day's classes and finally catching a break on the way home, she had now entered her creative zone. She turned the page and started sketching her world away, her soft hands fighting against the paper. She felt admiration for her little world. It had no color, and yet it bore entire ideas and ideals. Whatever the weight of its meaninglessness, it was her world. It was her world, and it was what she knew to love. The bus started to decelerate, bringing about her stop. Still smiling at her work, she tidied everything up and carefully got off her seat, locking eyes with the thoughtless man. Looking at her unrecognizable face, the man felt in his heart that he knew her, and yet, in most absurdity, he could not deny the fact that he had never seen her before in his life. And so instantaneously they parted ways, her going on to continue her studies and work on her little work and thereby herself, amplifying her existence through experience of the unexperiencable, and him going on to do his own thing, never to see her again. Many worlds found themselves getting intertwined with one another, sometimes for just a moment before spiraling away into separate voids. What would happen if one of those worlds collapsed while in the void, never to be experienced again? Would the other notice? Their paths would never align with one another again, for there was no destination nor starting point. Worlds continued to prosper and right themselves in beauty, flowing through the endless void that kept being proven too weak to absorb them. There is no doubt that their worlds will never cross again, and so his world trembled in the cold of the void.